Hello all, hope everyone is doing well. So, in our today's lecture, we'll be seeing about uterus. Uterus is a very important question. This was the essay question asked in anatomy paper 1 also in the university. Okay, and the important part is the supports of the uterus, where we'll be mentioning various structures supporting them. It may be quite confusing initially, so I'll try explaining everything in detail. Okay, so let's get into the session now. Our objectives for today will be an introduction to the genital organs and uterus in specific, location, shape and position, the parts of the uterus, relations, ligaments, supports of the uterus, structure and development, the blood supply, nerve supply, lymphatics, and finally, few clinical correlations. So first, the female genital organs can be divided into internal and external ones. The internal ones include pair of ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus and vagina. Ovaries are the female gonads and they produce and release egg every month, which will be transported through this fallopian tube to the uterine cavity. This fallopian tube has finger-like projections called the fimbriae, which will collect egg from the ovary. Okay, and the fallopian tube can be divided into four parts, namely the infundibulum, ampulla, isthmus and intramural part. And this ampulla is a place where the ovum gets fertilized by sperm and the fertilized one gets implanted into the uterine cavity. If you take vagina, it is otherwise called the birth canal, and this also conducts for the menstrual flow during menstruation in case of lack of fertilization. And the external genital organs, collectively called the vulva, includes mons pubis, which will lie over here, the hairy area, pair of labia majora and minora. Labia majora and minora. You have clitoris, as you see here, vestibule of vagina. This is nothing but a shallow depression found between the labia minora, and then pair of greater vestibular glands. So uterus is otherwise called the ovum, right? It is the major childbearing organ found in the females. And to describe anatomically, it's a hollow, thick-walled muscular organ with a narrow lumen. It is not as big as it appears because it has a very thick wall and the uterine cavity is only meager one, okay, like a slit. So let's see some functions, important functions of the uterus. So uterus is the site of implantation of the fertilized ovum and also responsible for the development of the embryo. And this uterus provides mechanical and nutritional support to the developing fetus and also removes waste from the fetus. In case if there is no fertilization, the endometrial shedding, which is the innermost layer, it sheds and results in menstruation. Okay, so these are the important functions of the uterus. Heading into the location of the uterus will be located in the lesser pelvis between the urinary bladder anteriorly and rectum posteriorly. If you see here, this is called the pelvic inlet, which is formed by the sacral promontory, ala of sacrum and part of pelvic bone. Okay, and this pelvic inlet will divide the pelvis into upper larger part and lower smaller part. This is called the greater or false pelvis and the below one is called lesser or true pelvis. So you can see from this diagram you have the pelvic inlet, which is this line. Above this is the greater pelvis or the false pelvis, and below this part is called the lesser pelvis or true pelvis, and the uterus will lie in this area called the lesser pelvis. Okay, and it will have the urinary bladder in front and rectum behind. So this will be the location of the uterus. Then the shape. The shape of the uterus can be compared to an inverted pear, as you see here, or otherwise called the pyriform shape. So it's inverted pear shaped and is flattened antero-posteriorly. And regarding the position, this will be obliquely placed between the bladder and the rectum, and its long axis will be horizontal if the bladder is empty in erect posture. So as it is somewhat bent over the urinary bladder, its long axis will be kind of horizontal when the bladder is empty. Okay, and this position can be explained by anteflexion and anteversion. I'll be explaining these two in the supports of the uterus, so you'll be cleared of it. Okay. Yes. Then we'll see about the parts of the uterus. In general, the entire uterus can be divided into larger expanded upper part and a smaller lower part. This larger upper part can be further divided into the fundus, this dome shaped part, which will lie above the opening of the fallopian tube, and the body, which will contain this uterine cavity, and then isthmus, which is the narrow constricted region connecting the uterine cavity to the cervical canal. Okay, and then the smaller lower cylindrical part is called the cervix. This is the cervix. From this diagram you can actually see the cervix protrudes a bit into the vagina. It's not separate from the vagina, it will continue a little into the vagina, and thereby the upper end of the vagina will form a region surrounding it. Okay, you can compare this to be a glass which is entering into one more glass. Okay, so if you see this opening, this vagina will be surrounding the lower part of the cervix. Okay, sorry for the worst diagram, but still. And this part which is surrounding the cervix will be called the fornix of the vagina. Okay, so because of this, the cervix can be divided into an upper supravaginal part and the lower vaginal part, which is surrounded by a part of vagina. And in general, the uterus will communicate with two structures. One is the fallopian tube at the upper lateral ends and vagina below. Okay, and the site where the fallopian tube attaches to the uterus is called the cornu. This part is called the cornu. This is very important because we'll see two or three structures which is attached to this part only in later part. Okay, so this is the cornu of the uterus. Then about the uterine cavity, if you take the uterus, it has a thick muscular wall. Okay, and thereby the uterine cavity is just a meager slit and appear triangle in coronal section, and this will communicate with the fallopian tube at the upper end and with the cervix at the lower end. Okay, and this is the cervical canal, which is the cavity of the cervix, which will be spindle shaped, that is elongated in the middle. This will communicate with the uterine cavity at the upper end with the help of internal os, and with the vagina with the help of external os. Os is nothing but ostium uteri. Okay, it's just the openings of the cervix above and below. This is called internal os and this is called external os. So this external os will be circular and smaller in nulliparous women who have not given birth to a child, and in case of multiparous women, it will be like a slit with anterior and posterior lips. Okay, hope this was clear. Then we'll see about few relations of the uterus. As you see here, I have made a tabular column to explain the relations, and this is how you have to make things simpler. You can make a flow chart or tabular columns, anything, to make the answer into an understandable form. This will make your work easy as well as the examiners. So I'll always advise to draw more charts or tabular columns so that it will be more understandable for you also, and it will be easy to correct for the examiners. And this is how I even presented my answer paper in university. Okay, enough of that. We'll see about the relations of the uterus. So first, if you take the body of the uterus, you can have anterior, posterior and the lateral relation. Okay, so anteriorly you have uterovesical pouch. See, this is the uterovesical pouch, which is formed by the fold of peritoneum extending till the isthmus. This is the isthmus region of the uterus, and the fold extends up to this isthmus, and the pouch within it is called the uterovesical pouch. And then you have the superior surface of the urinary bladder as the anterior relation. Posteriorly, you have recto-uterine pouch. This is also the fold of peritoneum. Okay, extending till the posterior fornix of vagina. And this will contain coils of ileum and sigmoid column, which is not given over here. It will lie somewhere over here. Okay, so then laterally, you have the broad ligament, which will be attached to the lateral wall, and then uterine artery and vein within them. These are the relations of the body of uterus. Going for the supravaginal part of the cervix. So anteriorly, it will be related to the posterior surface of the urinary bladder, this part. So the fornix will be the supravaginal part of the cervix will be related to the posterior surface of the bladder, and posteriorly the same relation as of body, that is the rectouterine pouch with coils of ileum and sigmoid colon, and then it will be related to the ureter and uterine artery laterally. Okay, going for the vaginal part, this is very easy. As I said, the cervix will insert into the vagina, and hence the vaginal part will have the fornices in all sides. So anteriorly you have anterior fornix, posteriorly the posterior fornix, and laterally the lateral fornices of the vagina. Okay, the covering part of the vagina is otherwise called the fornix. Okay, so this will make your work easy, I hope. Then the important part is the ligaments of the uterus. So first you have the broad ligament, which is a large double layered peritoneal fold. As you see in this diagram, it is this part which is extending all over, this yellowish giant one is called the broad ligament. So before seeing the boundaries and parts, I would like to explain the external features first, because the external feature of the broad ligament is actually dependent on the shape and position of bladder and uterus. Let's see how. So you can consider this position of the hands to be the broad ligament, the hand to be the broad ligament, and the position. Okay, so when the bladder is empty, okay, when the bladder over here is empty, the uterus will actually sling over, and thereby the broad ligament will obtain this position. Okay, and in this case the surface will be superior one and inferior one, and borders will be the anterior free border and the posterior attached border. But in this case, when the bladder is distended, that is the bladder is full, the uterus will be straight, and hence the broad ligament will obtain an erect posture, and thereby now the surface will be the anterior surface, posterior surface, the upper free border and the lower attached border. Hope it's clear. When the bladder is empty, it will be having superior and inferior surface, anterior and posterior border. But when the bladder is full, it will be erect, and thereby it will obtain anterior and posterior surface, superior and inferior border. Okay. So if you are clear with this, it will be easy to understand the further topics. So we will see about the boundaries. See, if you see in this diagram, so this is showing the uterus and broad ligament in erect posture. That is like when the bladder is full. Okay, and hence we will have superior and inferior border and usual medial and lateral border. Okay, and the medial border will be attached to the lateral wall of the uterus, and the lateral border will be attached to the pelvic bone. Okay, as well as the inferior border will be attached to the parts of the pelvic bone. And superiorly, if you take, I said it's a double layered fold, right? So these two layers will be continuing along the superior border, and they'll go and attach entirely to the fallopian tube. Okay, so this basically has a superior and inferior border, medial and lateral border, of which the medial border attaches to the lateral wall of the uterus, and lateral border attaches to the parts of the pelvic bone, as well as the inferior border will attach to the pelvic bone, and superiorly the two layers, the two folds will continue and attaches to the fallopian tube. Okay, and then we have four parts in the broad ligament. One is the mesosalpinx, mesometrium, mesovarium, and infundibulum pelvic ligament, or the suspense ligament of ovary. So we will see how it works. Yeah. So first is the mesosalpinx, right? So this is that part of broad ligament which is found between the fallopian tube and the proper ovarian ligament. So this is your fallopian tube, and this is your ovarian ligament. This ovarian ligament will connect your uterine pole of the ovary, or the lower pole, to the cornu. As I said, cornu will have few structures attached to it. So it will extend from the ovary to the cornu of the uterus. Okay, and this will form the proper ovarian ligament. And the broad ligament formed between the fallopian tube and this ovarian ligament is called the mesosalpinx. Then mesometrium. This is that part of broad ligament extending between the pelvic bone, body of uterus, to the ovary and the ovarian ligament. In general, the entire part below this is called the mesometrium. And you also have one more part is called the mesovarium. This is actually an extension from the posterior layer of the broad ligament, which will come and attach to the ovary entirely. It's not much clear. If you can notice, this fold of peritoneum over here will be your mesovarium, which will be derived from the posterior layer of the broad ligament and attached to the ovary. And then you have infundibulopelvic ligament or the suspensory ligament of ovary. This extends between the tubal pole and infundibulum of the fallopian tube and extends laterally. So this part, you see, the suspensory ligament, it will extend laterally, okay, to get attached to the walls of the lesser pelvis. And this holds the ovarian vessels, nerves and plexus. Okay, so this will be your infundibulopelvic ligament or suspensory ligament of ovary. These are nothing but the parts of the broad ligament. And if you see, this is the posterior view. Okay, so the ovary, ligament and everything will be much better to view from the posterior aspect. And anteriorly you will have one main ligament, which is the round ligament. So we will be seeing the relations clearly in the further slides. You also have few contents which is lying between the broad ligament, because being a double layered structure, it can accommodate some important structures. And this include the fallopian tube or the uterine tube, which is at the upper end. If you see this blue lining, okay, this is the broad ligament. As I said, it will continue at its upper end, okay, and it will enclose the fallopian tube also. And below that you have two ligaments, namely the ligament of ovary. This is the ligament of ovary and round ligament, just before I mentioned. So this will be present antero-inferior to the fallopian tube, and the ligament of ovary will be present postero-inferior to the fallopian tube, and everything will be attached to the cornu of the uterus. And then you have two main arteries, namely the uterine artery and ovarian artery, nerve plexus like the uterovaginal and ovarian plexus, lymph nodes and vessels, fibroareolar tissue, and three main embryological remnants, namely paraoophoron, epiophoron and Gartner's duct, which is its duct, and the vesicular appendices. You can better appreciate these embryological remnants in this diagram. As you see, this is the epiophoron and its duct called the Gartner's duct. This element is the paraoophoron and this is the vesicular appendices. These are nothing but the embryological remnants which are still remaining within the broad ligaments. And this diagram is to better explain the relations at the cornu. So this is the fallopian tube which will attach the uterus at the cornu, right? And in front and inferiorly you will have the round ligament of the uterus. See, this is the round ligament of the uterus. And posteriorly and inferior to this you will have the ligament of ovary. Okay, so if you take fallopian tube to the middle structure, antero-inferiorly you have the round ligament of uterus, and postero-inferiorly you have the ligament of ovary. And this is the main relation at the cornu. Hope it made sense. So then we will be seeing about the other ligaments or the folds. One is the rectouterine fold. This rectouterine fold is a paired semilunar fold of peritoneum extending between the cervix and the rectum, forming the lateral boundary of the rectouterine pouch of Douglas. Just from the name you can understand recto and uterine. So it's between some part of rectum and uterine, some part of uterus. So it's between the rectum and cervix part of the uterus, and this forms the lateral boundary of the rectouterine pouch of Douglas. You know, it's the most dependent part in the peritoneal and pelvic cavity, the rectouterine pouch of Douglas. So this rectouterine fold will be forming its lateral boundary. And then you have uterovesical fold, which is otherwise called the anterior ligament. Utero refers to some part of uterus and vesicle means urinary bladder. Okay, so this extends from the front of uterus onto the superior surface of the bladder at the level of isthmus. Okay, so if you can appreciate, this is the uterovesical fold. This is the front of uterus and then is the superior surface of the bladder, and this is up to isthmus where the ligament extends, and this will hold the vesicouterine pouch. Okay, and then one more ligament is the posterior ligament, nothing but the rectovaginal fold. So this extends between the posterior fornix of the vagina onto the front of the rectum. So this peritoneal fold from the posterior fornix will get reflected along the anterior surface of the rectum, and this includes the pouch of Douglas. Okay, so these are nothing but the peritoneal folds extending between the structures. Yes, so let's get into an important part, which is the supports of the uterus. As I mentioned here, you have primary as well as secondary support. Why is this support necessary? If you know, uterus is an extensively enlarging organ. Okay, it's a mobile organ which will undergo extensive change during the reproductive life of a woman. In non-pregnant women, it will be just a pear-shaped structure, but in a pregnant woman, it can enlarge up to the abdominal cavity. So in such cases, you must have some support for that organ, right? So hence the supports are very important in case of uterus. So we'll divide the support into the primary and secondary one. And in primary support, we'll be seeing about the muscular support, visceral support, and one more is the fibromuscular support. Okay, and the muscular support includes pelvic diaphragm, perineal body, and urogenital diaphragm. So if you take this pelvic diaphragm, so this diaphragm will form a gutter-shaped floor for the pelvic wall, the pelvic cavity, and divides the lesser pelvis from the perineum. Okay, and this will be made of two major muscles. One is the levator ani, and another one is the coccygeus. This levator ani can be further divided into sphincteric vagina, which is around the vagina, otherwise called the levator prostate in males, puborectalis, and iliococcygeus part. Okay, and you have two main openings. One is called the hiatus urogenitalis, which is this triangular gap over here, which will accommodate the urethra and vagina in female and just urethra in males. And hiatus rectalis, it's an opening between the perineal body and the anococcygeal raphe, and this will provide path to the anorectal junction. Okay, so this pelvic diaphragm will provide a major support, okay, to the pelvic organs and mainly uterus. Then you have perineal body. You can appreciate well from the before diagram where the perineal body is present. So this is the perineal body, which will be located between the opening of the vagina and the anorectal junction. Okay, yeah. So this is the perineal body. So this is a wedge-shaped structure which forms a mass of fibromuscular tissue, and it lies in the midline at the junction of urogenital triangle and the anal triangle. So if you see here, this will be your urogenital triangle, and this will be your anal triangle. Okay, and this perineal body is a midline structure which will lie in between them, and this is composed of 10 muscles, of which 4 are paired and 2 will lie individual. Okay, so the first one is 2 superficial transverse perineal muscle, and then 2 deep transverse perineal muscle, 2 bulbospongious muscles, 2 levator ani muscles, which form 8 muscles. Another 2 are the sphincteric ani externus and longitudinal muscle coat of the anal canal. So these are the 10 muscles which will contribute to the formation of the perineal body, and this will provide a firm structure to the organs of the pelvis and uterus in main. Hope it's clear. Then we have the urogenital diaphragm. If you see, this will be your levator ani, which is forming a pelvic diaphragm, and below you have this urogenital diaphragm. This flat structure is called the urogenital diaphragm. So this will be made of 2 muscles, namely the sphincteric urethrae and the deep transverse perineal muscles. Okay, and it will be covered by 2 fascia. One is the superior fascia of urogenital diaphragm, another one is the inferior fascia of diaphragm, otherwise called the important perineal membrane. Okay, so these are the main muscular supports of the uterus. Then we'll see some visceral supports. Visceral means organs. Some of the organs are contributing to the support of the uterus. One is the urinary bladder. As we said, it will rest, the uterus will itself rest on the bladder. And second one is the vagina, which provides support from below. And third one is the uterine axis. This refers to the position which is keeping the uterus in stable. Okay, So as I already mentioned, these can be explained by anteversion and anteflexion. If you remember, I said this in the position of uterus. So what is this anteversion and anteflexion? Yes, so anteversion is a position where the where the long axis of the cervix will be bent forward on the long axis of the vagina, and this will form a 90-degree angle. See, this is the long axis of vagina and this will be your long axis of cervix, and the angle between these two, okay, is called the angle of anteversion, and this will be around 90-degree. Okay, and then you have anteflexion position, which is the position of uterus where the long axis of the body of uterus is bent forward on the cervix. So this is the long axis of uterus bent forward on the long axis of cervix, and this will form an angle of 126 degree. So it will be given as 170 in most of your books, but it's actually 125 or 126 degrees. Okay, so this is called the angle of anteflexion. If you're quite confused, I would help. If you see, the long axis of cervix is common in both. Okay, even here you have the long axis of cervix and here long axis of cervix, which is common for both the angles. And in case of anteversion, it is the long axis of vagina. You can remember V for V. Okay, so long axis of vagina or long axis of cervix is called position of anteversion or angle of anteversion, and long axis of body of uterus on the cervix is called the angle of anteflexion. Okay, so this might help you to understand better. And then we have the important part, which is the fibromuscular or the true ligaments, which are the supporting structures of the uterus. So how is this different from the ligaments we previously saw? So those ligaments are just the peritoneal folds, okay, but these ligaments are formed by the condensation of the pelvic fascia, and hence they are considered to be the true ligaments and important supporting structures of the uterus. So first one is called the transverse cervical ligament. This is otherwise called the McIntosh or the cardinal ligament because it's very important one, formed by the condensation of pelvic fascia, which you can see over here. This is the transverse cervical ligament. Each ligament will form a fan-shaped fibromuscular band and extends from the lateral aspect of cervix and upper vaginal wall to the lateral pelvic wall. Okay, so being a transverse one, it will be like crossing the pelvic cavity, right? So it will extend from the lateral aspect of the cervix and vagina to the lateral wall of pelvis and prevents the downward displacement of the uterus. And then you have the pubocervical ligament. So pubo is a part of pelvic bone, pubis. Okay, so they are a pair of fibrous bands which extends from the cervix to the posterior aspect of the pubic bone. This is the pubocervical ligament extending from the cervix to the posterior aspect of the pubic bone, and they cross on either sides of the urinary bladder. And then the third ligament is called the uterosacral ligament. Uterosacral ligament. This one. Okay, so these ligaments are paired fibrous bands which extend from the cervix to the second or third sacral vertebrae and pass on either side of the rectum. Okay, so this is the uterosacral ligament, and this will pull the uterus quite back and maintains them in position. And finally you have the round ligament of uterus. It's a very important one, otherwise called the ligament teres uteri. Okay, so 10 centimeter long fibromuscular band. Okay, and this will begin at the lateral angle of the uterus. As I've already mentioned, this is the one which will be lying antero-inferior to the fallopian tube at the corner of the uterus. Okay, so this will extend from the lateral angle of the uterus and passes forward and laterally. So consider this as the lateral angle. It will pass forward and laterally and transfers through the inguinal canal. You have an inguinal canal over here. It will pass through the inguinal canal, and the superficial ring, it will split into numerous fibrous threads which will merge with the fibroareolar tissue of the labia majus. It will just fuse with the connective tissue of the labia majus over here. Okay, and this round ligament along with the uterosacral ligament is very important for maintaining the position of the uterus, which is that anteversion and anteflexion. If you see, this round ligament will cause forward pull of the uterus, which will be contracted by this uterosacral ligament from back. So this helps in maintaining that angle at which the uterus lies stable. Okay, so these two are very important for maintaining them in position. Hope this made sense. This is very, very important. Then going for secondary support, these are the structures which already mentioned, namely the broad ligament of uterus, uterovesical fold of peritoneum, and rectovaginal fold. These are called secondary structure because they don't much contribute to the support of the uterus. They are just related to the uterus and can contribute a little to support, okay, but they are not the main ligaments of support, okay. So we have the broad ligament, this is yellow one, the entire one if you see, then the uterovesical fold over here and the rectovaginal fold, okay. These are minor supporting structures of the uterus. Let's see something about the structure of the uterus. So first, the uterus will be lined by having three major layers. One is the outermost perimetrium, middle myometrium, and inner endometrium, okay. So it will be lined by a columnar epithelium, and the three layers include perimetrium, myometrium, and endometrium. So this endometrium is an inner lining which will show cyclic changes every month, okay. And myometrium is the thickest layer made up of smooth muscle bundles. This thick layer is called the myometrium, and this is composed of three different fibers. One is the outer longitudinal, middle crisscross, and inner circular fibers. And the perimetrium, if you see, this is the perimetrium, which is nothing but the peritoneal covering of the uterus derived from the broad ligament. If you compare the structure of the uterus and cervix, it will be entirely different because the cervix has no endometrial lining and does not show cyclic changes during menstruation, okay. A short note on development of the uterus. If you remember, the development of male genitalia was explained in my previous lecture. Reproductive system entirely develops from the urogenital ridge, which is actually formed by the condensation of the intermediate mesoderm, okay. So in every organ of the reproductive system will develop from the urogenital ridge only, and that is formed by the condensation of intermediate mesoderm. And this urogenital ridge develops into gonads and ductal system, and gonads here refers to the ovaries, and the ductal system includes mesonephric or the Wolffian duct and paramesonephric or the Mullerian duct. The Wolffian duct actually develops in females, and in females it is the Mullerian duct which is developing into genitalia, and this Mullerian duct will form the uterus, fallopian tubes, and the upper two-thirds of vagina. And the external genitalia will actually develop from the urogenital sinus under the stimulation of estrogen. So this is how we used to explain the development, right? So initially in the 6th week of intrauterine life, you will have a bipotential gonad which will have an ability to develop either into testis or an ovary, okay. If you take the females, they will have XX chromosome, and male they have the XY chromosome. So in males, usually the Y chromosome will have SRY gene which codes for testis determining factor, which will contribute to the development of male sex organs, okay. But what is that signaling factor in females? There is no such specific factor in female, okay. So just the absence of SRY gene and testis determining factor will be enough to stimulate the development of female sexual organs, okay. So once there is no SRY gene and testis determining factor being present, the gonads will automatically develop into ovaries, and these ovaries will secrete estrogen which will help in the development of genitalia. And if you remember, the testis will have Sertoli and other cells, okay, Redic cells, and the Sertoli cells will produce Mullerian inhibiting substance. If that's present, it will be inhibiting the development of Mullerian duct. So in the absence of SRY gene, testis determining factor, Redic cells, Sertoli cells, there will be no such inhibiting substance which is inhibiting the development of female organs, okay. Hence it will completely develop into, the Mullerian duct will completely develop into fallopian tube, uterus, and the upper two-thirds of vagina, forming the internal genitalia, and the external genitalia arises from the urogenital sinus under the stimulus of estrogen, okay. So just the presence or absence of SRY in the Y chromosome determines whether it should be the female gonad or the male one, okay. Hope you are clear. So finally we will see about the arterial supply and venous drainage. So first it will be supplied by two main arteries, namely the uterine artery and the ovarian artery. You have two uterine arteries and two ovarian arteries, okay, which will give off the uterine branches to supply the uterus. If you see here, uterine artery is a branch of anterior division of the internal iliac artery, which will actually head towards the lateral part of the uterus, and they'll cross the ureter, okay, and at the lateral wall they'll ascend up and give few branches, and then they'll run along the fallopian tube to end by anastomosing with the ovarian artery, okay. So at this part it will give few branches like the ureteric branches, vaginal branches, and then the cervical branches. At the body they will give arcuate branches, which will just run transversely and anastomose with the counterparts, okay, along the anterior and posterior surface, and finally it will give tubal branches at the fallopian tube. So the main arteries are the uterine arteries and the ovarian arteries. And the venous drainage is by the uterine and the vaginal veins, which will ultimately drain into internal iliac vein, okay. It's simple to remember. Going for the nerve supply, the sympathetic fibers are derived from T12 to L2 spinal segments, and the parasympathetic fibers are derived from S2 to S4 spinal segments. The sympathetic fibers are mainly responsible for the uterine contraction and vasoconstriction, and this mainly includes the inferior hypogastric plexus of nerves. And the parasympathetic fibers, if you take, they are mainly responsible for the uterine relaxation and vasodilation, and they mainly include the pelvic splanchnic nerves. The uterus actually is controlled by the hormones, okay, and nerve regulation is not of much importance. Mainly the hormones, the female sex hormones, are the one which is governing the function of the uterus. So finally, about the lymphatic drainage, it's quite important. For this, we will be dividing the entire uterus into three parts. One is the fundus and upper part of the body, lower part of the body, and finally the cervix. So if you take the fundus and upper part, if you take the upper part and the fundus, so this is the upper part, okay, this will go and drain directly into the pre and para-aortic lymph nodes, or it can also drain into superficial inguinal lymph nodes over here, okay. So from the fundus and upper part of the body, it is the pre and para-aortic lymph nodes and superficial inguinal lymph nodes, which is the lymph is drained into, okay. And from the lower part of the body, it usually drains into external iliac lymph nodes. And finally from the cervix, you can divide into lateral, posterolateral and posterior drainage. So laterally it will go and drain into, if you see here, it will drain into external iliac lymph nodes and operated lymph nodes. And posterolaterally, they will drain into internal iliac lymph nodes, which you see here. This one is the internal iliac lymph node. And posteriorly, it will drain into sacral lymph nodes, which is this. So I'll repeat. So from the fundus and upper part of the body, it will drain into pre and para-aortic lymph nodes, and few drain into superficial inguinal lymph nodes. And then from the lower part of the body, they will drain into external iliac lymph nodes over here, okay. And cervix, laterally they will drain into external iliac lymph nodes and operator lymph nodes as well. Posterolaterally, they will drain into internal iliac lymph nodes, which is here, and then posteriorly they will drain into the sacral lymph nodes, okay. You will be having these lymphatics on either sides, so they are padded structures. Then we will end up with few of the clinical correlations. So first is the uterine prolapse. Uterine prolapse is a condition where the uterus slips down or protrudes into the vagina, and this usually occurs due to damage of the supporting structures, mainly the pelvic diaphragm or the perineal body, and this occurs during difficult childbirth. So if you see here, this is the perineal body and diaphragm, which is quite damaged, okay, during difficult childbirth, and this is resulting in downward displacement of the uterus. And depending on the position of the uterus, the prolapse can be classified into first degree, second degree and third degree prolapse, Okay. Then endometriosis. This is a disorder in which the tissue lining the uterus grows outside it and can be found on the ovaries, fallopian tubes, or even in the intestine. And this usually occurs due to retrograde menstrual flow, and this causes pain and irregularity in menstruation. Okay, so this is a painful condition. And then you have hysterectomy. Hyster means uterus. Okay, and ectomy, in any term ectomy refers to some surgical removal. So this is surgical removal of the uterus, which is usually performed in case of uterine fibroids, which is a non-cancerous tumor. Okay, it's a benign tumor, or in case of uterine prolapse. So this can be divided into total hysterectomy. This is when the entire part of the uterus is removed. That's called total hysterectomy. If the fallopian tube and the ovary on one side or either side are removed, it is called total hysterectomy with salpingo-oophorectomy. Salpingo refers to the fallopian tube and oopho refers to the ovary. So if it's along with the fallopian tube and ovary, that's called total hysterectomy with salpingo-oophorectomy. And one more is called the radical hysterectomy. This is where the uterus along with fallopian tube, ovary, part of vagina, and the surrounding connective tissue structures are also removed. And this is done in case of cervical and ovarian cancers, and that's called radical hysterectomy. Okay, so it's a surgical procedure of removing the uterus in case of uterine fibroids or prolapse, and this can be subdivided into total hysterectomy with salpingo and oophorectomy, and radical hysterectomy. You can also have subtotal if only a part of the uterus is being removed. Okay, so hope this made sense. So this was all about uterus. I tried explaining everything clearly, so hope it made sense, you guys. Please go through this topic because it's very, very important one. And as I mentioned before, the supports of the uterus is very important part where you feel quite confusing, but you have to read them well and produce well in the paper. Okay, so yeah, this is all about uterus. Thanks for your attention. Stay safe and keep learning. Thank you.